and welcome to CFI Breakfast Bytes, a podcast series that is brought to you by the World Bank Center of Excellence and Rabo Partnerships and Foundation. My name is Rubiga Sivakumaran. During the International Symposium on CFIs, one of the cross-cutting themes was that of digitalization and information systems. And this is what I will talk about today with Daniel Huba, Vice President, Enterprise Development at Mastercard in Kenya, and Thiago Muller, Team Leader at Sicredi in Brazil. Welcome to the virtual studio, both of you. Thiago, being part of a CFI that puts a lot of emphasis on digitization, what can you say about the importance of digitization in CFIs?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Huba, for being here today. It is a pleasure for me to talk once more about this topic, which was very interesting at this symposium that we had last year. So I'm very glad for the invitation and for the opportunity to be here today with you again. Just talking a little bit about Sicredi. We are a system of cooperatives in Brazil. There are more than 100 cooperatives in our system, and we work in very different regions across the country. So I think this is one of the main challenges that we have when and this brings a lot of importance when we talk about digitization, because we need to be close to our members. And I really think that digitization is one more way that we can keep in touch with these customers. I think that in the pandemic, it brought the topic such to evidence, because people just couldn't be physically present, be physically together. So I think that many trends that were already taking place, they were just faster than we were experiencing before the pandemic. So I think that the main thing that we need to think here, that digitization just broadens our relationship with our customers, and in our case, our members. That's how we call them. And we have some examples, some things that we did during the pandemic. I think that there's very interesting tool that we rolled out during the pandemic period, like in 2020, which is the WhatsApp Enterprise. It is a tool that a member of one of our cooperatives can keep in touch with his account manager through the WhatsApp. And all the conversations, all the chats that are taking place there, they are recorded. We can keep track of those conversations and get to know our members, their needs. So we were just piloting this tool before the pandemic, because we would prefer the physical contact with our members, but when the pandemic sparked in Brazil and around the world, we just couldn't do it anymore. So that was one of the initiatives that we deployed during the pandemic, and it's a huge success. Even now that we have less restrictions here in Brazil, that we can be physically present sometimes. But this one more way of keeping in touch with our customers is a huge success.
Yeah, so the pandemic has been kind of an accelerator for digitization at Sicredi.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Huba, looking at this topic from a different perspective, you are responsible for setting up agricultural markets in various countries in Africa. Which opportunities do you see in partnering with CFI networks?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ruby, and thank you, Thiago. Again, I join myself with Ruby in Thiago, in appreciating the opportunity to be here again today. Mastercard has been in the digitization business for quite a while now, and we feel very much honored and privileged that we have an opportunity to really go deeper, to share our expertise, to share our thoughts and even our experiences of how digitization is really making a difference in the markets where we've deployed. And specifically, in Africa, we are very much accelerating our engagement at what we call the base of the pyramid. And for us, agriculture represents an important segment. Like we talked about during the symposium, the importance of the sector, not just to the economy, but also to the livelihood of the various individuals that live in the BOP, as we call it. But importantly, the fact that there's a very strong linkage between cooperative movement and financial institutions that have a leaning towards cooperative. One of the areas that we believe remain a strong area of opportunity is the fact that there is a chance to be able to standardize how to deploy technology across multiple markets. I think one of the challenges we face today is the fact that while there are many siloed applications in different markets by different actors, how do you gain from an economy of scale when you want to digitize at scale, following the critical principles of how do we respect privacy and data management, how do we ensure that there's security in how we handle that data, how do we ensure that there's interoperability for data, so that financial institutions that are serving these particular cooperatives and their members can then be able to leverage the platform and bring on their technologies onto it. So I see the opportunity to be able to actually leverage the CFIs to reach out to more cooperatives at scale, given that the CFIs already have that route. And we are looking for partnership from a Mastercard perspective around how can CFIs be anchor partners of scale for digitization in a way in which technology becomes an accelerator for information sharing. Technology becomes an accelerator for transaction digitization. Technology becomes an accelerator for data-driven decision making. These are things that, in my view, will bring better success for the entire ecosystem. Just to give you a few examples of how we actually bring those opportunities live in Africa, we have a couple of deployments today in market. So in Uganda, for example, we work with an agri-tech that is partnering with different cooperatives in Uganda in the coffee, in the maize, in the bean value chain, and digitizing the farmer producer organization, records, not just the bio data, but their transaction data, and linking that to financial services, so that now financial institutions have a way of tracking, the distribution of input, but also the repayment of that particular input, linking that to the off-taking. So that is, we are seeing a huge appetite by financial actors, but what is unique is by financial actors who have a root in the cooperative movement, because then they see the importance of it. If you look at Kenya, for example, we work with one of the largest cooperative banks in Kenya, which is a corporate institution, and the goal for them is to then digitize over 10,000 cooperatives over a period of 5 years. And they're looking at the technology as a lever to do that, and they want to aggregate service providers onto a common platform. We see the same trends, if you go into Mozambique, where you have a couple of microfinance institutions changing their trends to focus on the cooperative movement, because now they can have data that can help inform better decisions. And we could give more examples, but I think for me, there is a great chance for partnership. There is an opportunity to really scale, but in a secure and a more sustainable way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds all quite promising. Yet one of the unique characteristics of CFIs in comparison to other types of financial institutions is also their closeness to the communities they work in. And Thiago, how does Sicredi manage to preserve this cooperative spirit while also digitizing their services?
Yeah, that's a great question. And even though we didn't rehearse this with Huba, I think that I will bring some points here that connect with what he was sharing with us. I think that it's broader than the CFI business itself, but I think that no matter the business you're in, you can lose your essence with digitization. Actually, the technology, when you digitize at scale, you need to look at this as a way to potentialize your strengths, to enhance what you are doing, what you already do best. What is your differentiator from your competition? So as we were talking before, like our digitization initiatives, we deploy solutions that we can have one more channel to be close to our members. We can have human contact without being physical contact. So I think that this is one way that we can bring your essence to life, even in a digital solution. So I think that this is also a way of learning, a path of knowledge that we are acquiring when it comes to digital transformation. Because if you read some papers or some references from some years ago, when you talk about digitization and digital transformation, in my point of view, it was too focused on technology, like go to cloud, deploy microservices. But in the end, what's the value for your customer of all those technologies? And I think that when you go to scale, you really need to think of the quality of the digital experience you're providing. Because if you're a customer, if you're a member, he or she doesn't feel the uniqueness of your brand through the digital experience, this will bring resistance. Because then the person will prefer to go to a physical contact, to talk to somebody, to have the service. But when you can bring this essence of your brand through the digital experience, I think you can mitigate this risk and preserve and keep your essence alive. So I think that the quality and for this data is very important, because you can have like personalization at scale. If you really can deploy data science and big data solutions, I think that this is a very important thing. But we are trying to respond to this threat, like if there's some kind of resistance, really paying attention to the quality of our digital services and try to think of it as a way not to replace our human touch and human essence, but to enhance it and potentialize it.
Mm-hmm. Huba, final question for you. During the symposium, you mentioned the importance of adequate infrastructure to ensure successful digitization. What are, according to you, the most critical preconditions for digitization?
Thank you very much, Ruby. I was, listening to Thiago and just getting excited that, we are in different continents. And when we talk about the cooperative, it's as if we're in the same room, and that just tells you the strength by which cooperative movements can really, drive change at scale, regardless of whether you're in Latin America or whether you're in Africa or whether you're in India. To your question about infrastructure, like I said during our earlier conversation, and I think in the previous session, for me, infrastructure can be seen from two perspectives. Let me talk about the social infrastructure for a minute. And for us, the social infrastructure is really the people-related things that must be present for digitization to take off at scale. There are two things, in my view, from a social infrastructure perspective that we must look at. Number one is, what is the presence of a digital agent network that can be able to drive the change that we want? That presence of a digital agent network is important because the level where we are today, the cooperatives that we work with today will require hand-holding to be able to transition into the digital world. That hand-holding will not be successful if we don't have digital champions that they can relate to in their villages, in their day-to-day business, so that it's not some flown-in expert from the capital cities and other countries trying to drive change. So building that digital agent network that will drive change is the critical social infrastructure that must be in place. The second infrastructure is, in my view, which I call it an element of social infrastructure, but you can look at it from a commercial side perspective, is what then is the commercial mindset for digitization? That the cooperative movement must appreciate that digitization is not a donation from donors, from other bodies. It is a critical necessity for survival in the business future. So how you focus on, thinking, acting, and shaping digitization from a commercial lens, that it speaks to your value proposition, it speaks to your KPIs and metrics, it speaks to your, business efficiency. And if you look at and layer those elements, not as a project within the CFI and even down to the cooperative, but a core offering, that will be critical. Let me turn to the technical infrastructure or technology infrastructure. For me, one of the critical things there is devices. Access to devices are important. A lot of our cooperatives are in rural areas. So we must have technologies that are built for rural communities, which does not necessarily depend on GSM or data connectivity. So how do we make sure that the devices that are available can then work in offline environments? They are rugged enough to survive the terrain in which, for example, the farmers are operating in. Those are critical necessities. And of course, the other necessity for me is the devices are not just for the users. Are there other alternative devices we need to think about, whether it is a card or a mobile phone? Those are things that we cannot ignore. And in my view, if those things are understood and are put together from a de-risking perspective, then we can take off. But if we just go and put technology and hope that the infrastructure will be ready to absorb it, we will be very surprised. And we'll keep talking about technology is present, but activation is 50%, 30%. It is not scaling. Why? Because we're not doing enough at the infrastructure level.
Thank you very much, Huba and Thiago. In the next episode, we will be back with CFIs and access to capital. For now, thank you for listening and stay tuned.
Thank you for having us, Ruby. Thank you.